answer or get people on for questions at the end of this. So thank you very much, Jane. It's amazing to be here. I'm really grateful that I was asked to come and speak. I'm going to be talking about, I guess, how I used art making as a vehicle for healing and for working and processing through my grief, and also the accumulation of the losses that I experienced. And so I was going to start my story in 2005, which seems like a long time ago now. At the time, I was, had a young family, and my sister, I had two sisters at that time. At that point, we had already had many deaths in our life, so we really leaned on each other. And my family and I were traveling to be with my sister Donna, to be able to have some vacation time with her, but also we were going to be helping her with her financials. She had had some health problems due to diabetes. So by that point, she was in a wheelchair. She had dialysis and was having some heart problems. So after traveling 800 kilometers to be with her, we arrived in town and we couldn't reach her by phone. And so in those days, we didn't really have cell phones like we do now. And so at that point, I didn't really worry too much. I just thought, this is, she's probably out with friends at the mall, or, doing something to prepare for our visit. And I didn't really think about it too much. But the next morning, after not hearing back from her, I started to worry. And so I went over to her apartment, and that's when I discovered her body. And she had died. Probably they predicted shortly after I had last spoke to her. And so you can imagine, if anyone has had that experience, it's very tragic. There's a lot of shock. You don't know what to do. There was a criminal investigation because, having had an amputation and in a wheelchair, she was in a lot of pain. So there's a lot of pain medication around, and the coroner was involved. And so once things were, released to me, I had to start planning a funeral. So I went from a vacation to planning a funeral and having to write a eulogy for someone that I loved very dearly. I'm going to show you a picture of her. I do have some pictures, and to be honest, I am not the Zoom master that you might think I should be. I don't really use Zoom very often. So I think you'll see my desktop, and there's messages here. Let me just get rid of that. So this is, let me see if I can get rid of that screen. There we go. And this one, okay. This is Donna and me. So when I was born, Donna was 14. And at that time, I was the baby of 6 children. And so, we had what I would call a love story. She was always with me. And so when I discovered her body, you can imagine the feelings that came, a lot of loss. We'd always leaned on each other through our other losses. By that time, we'd experienced the death of my mom when I was 18, my dad when I was 32, and our brothers, and a couple of other family members in there as well. And we had one surviving sister, Wanda, who lived in Winnipeg. And so everything changed that day. And I didn't know what grief was. Having lost all of those other family members, I never heard the word grief. No one ever talked about being bereaved. It was a foreign concept to me. And so, we did the funeral, and I settled up everything with her apartment, and we headed home. And I tried to get back to, and I'm going to use quotes here, normal. And for anyone who has been grieving, you can understand that that's really challenging when you've been facing a tragic loss like that. And so I'll talk about the symptoms. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I had waves of despair and sadness. I was confused. I had no ability to concentrate. I'm usually a very peaceful, calm person, I started acting very out of character for myself. So I had rage, fits of rage. One of the rage, experiences I had, I ended up smashing all of the pottery that I had made. At that time, the art form that I was using was pottery. And so that was really hard to understand. I yearned to be with her, and that yearning meant that I really didn't care if I lived or died. And it's hard for me to even think that way now. I can't imagine how desperate I felt to be with her. And the thing that bothered me the most about that experience was that people kept telling me that it was the death of my sister, right? They kept trying to put that label on my loss. And they really didn't understand that it's not the label, it's about the relationship that I had with her. So you can imagine that little face in the picture. I suddenly had to imagine my life without her in it for the first time ever. And I didn't know what to do with that. So that label should have said surrogate mom, should have said best friend, should have said confidant, should have said my champion. But that label of sister kept getting put on there, and my sadness and my loss downplayed as if there was something wrong with me. So let me get rid of this picture. So I struggled with what to do with it. Now, Donna and I had always been very artistic. She was very musical. She had written a book of poetry. She taught me how to draw, and we loved art making. And I call it art. I would say now it's art making, and we used all different forms of art making. Now I know that as being expressive arts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So arriving back home, I didn't know what to do with these feelings that were coming. I didn't know how to describe it to anyone. I felt very isolated in that because no one I knew had had that many losses. No one I knew had had so many losses so young, right? And I didn't know about bereaved families either. And I didn't even know what bereaved meant. Like, it was really interesting. Now, Donna and I always had the moon. That was, there's that saying you hear, love you to the moon and back. That was our saying. And so I had the moon. That's one thing I did have. And I would find the moon wherever it was. After my partner fell asleep, I would sneak out of bed and I would try to go into each window of my house and look at the moon and try to find it. And I would feel grounded, and I would lay down and I would give myself permission to cry. And what I now know, grieve her. At that time, I didn't really understand that. At that time, it felt like a broken heart. And so one thing I started doing was trying to find ways of describing how I felt through images, through quotes, through text, to help other people around me to get it. And so one thing that happened was I read an article about Juliet's Wall. For anyone who doesn't know about Juliet's Wall, you have to go see it. It's beautiful. It's in Verona, Italy. I'm going to pull up a picture of it. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Can you see that?
We can.
Yeah. Okay. So Juliet's Wall is in Verona, Italy, and it's the wall for the brokenhearted. Now, that's what I believed happened to me. My heart broke that day, when I had to find her and had to learn how to live without her here in a physical way. It felt like a broken heart. And so I also felt like I hit a brick wall. And so the only thing I knew how to do was I was like, I'm going to paint a brick wall. So that's how it started, the art making part. And I didn't understand what I was doing. I just knew that I hadn't even touched paint for 20 years, but I had this desire in me to be able to put it out there and help people understand what I was going through. So I painted a brick wall, and let me try to find that one. Oh, that one's really small, I think. Let's see if I can make it a bit bigger. There I am looking a lot younger. So basically what I did was I started with just a brick wall, and I had this massive canvas, and I painted a brick wall because that's what it felt like. I felt like I had hit a brick wall, that I was very isolated and alone in my sadness. And then it came to me that I needed to start to show people what that broken heart felt like. And one of the things, and I don't think you can see it on here, but in the middle of the painting, I just wrote in, I believe it was charcoal, "You are beautiful." And that was something that she'd always say to me, "You're so beautiful. You know, you're the most beautiful sister." Don't tell my sister Wanda I said that, but you're the most beautiful. And I missed her. I really missed her. That's what was coming through. So this was probably about 6 months after the loss, where I finally found some way of being able to put it outside of my body. And some of the other things I scratched in there is, you know, I miss the sound of your voice. I miss your laugh. You can see some X's and O's in there. I really found that this helped me be able to put it out there. It was about the love story. That's what I was really missing, was that love story that we shared. And so being able to put that out there, that started me, this process of being able to start to use it as a vehicle, being able to process the emotions. Still, I didn't know it was grief, right? So I just needed an outlet, and I found it. So that led me into using expressive arts. Now, expressive arts, for people that don't know, expressive arts is basically using all modalities of art making. So it could be poetry, it could be mixed media art, it could be, I'm trying to think of anything else, music, movement. It could be like just visual arts, it could be collage, it could be journaling. And basically what you're trying to do is find a way of taking one part of it and using it to deepen the experience. So that's what I was doing. I didn't know it was called expressive arts. That's what I was doing. But so in, I guess it was 2008, I ended up in the graduate expressive arts program in, at that time it was in Halliburton. And I started to understand what was going on internally for me. At that time, there was a woman named Faye Wilkinson, who was the head of the program. And she taught me that what was happening inside of me, that I was trying to put outside of me, trying to express myself in, was actually grief. And that I was bereaved. And honestly, that was the first time I'd ever heard those words. And so being able to name it, suddenly I was like, oh, that's grief. Wow. And she said to me, and I'm sure, you know, anyone who knows me, they've probably heard this story, you know, Lorrie, you believe that grief is your weakness. But if you can heal from this and learn how to process your grief, this will be your greatest strength. And, you know, she guaranteed me of that, and I trusted her. And part of expressive arts is trusting the process. And so I started to be able to envision that I could heal from those losses and be able to rebuild my life. And so I finally had a container to be able to use as a way of expressing it. And so some of the art that came along were a lot of hearts, a lot of, I would say like sutured hearts. I don't even think I have a picture of that one, but a lot of textured hearts. And then I would use quotes. So the quote that really helped me just go forward, I guess, in my life was, "You can never cross the ocean unless you have the courage to lose sight of the shore." It's supposedly by Christopher Columbus. I love that quote. That quote just really spoke to me. And so I was able to take that quote, make images, make poetry, be able to deepen that experience. And that helped me process whatever I was feeling. In grief, we often talk about waves of grief. And that's truly what I was believing, was that, you know, these waves are helping me cross this vast ocean that I'm in. And I have to trust that there's something on the other side of this and that I can heal from this. And so it really did help me rebuild my life. In the middle of that, I found bereaved families. So Faye had given me the BFO number and told me to call. And at that time, it was Deb and Hilda. and they invited me in for a cup of tea and some cookies. And they showed me where the group would take place. And it was at that time weekly. There was a weekly Thursday group. And I came to the group, and I think Gail Christie is also here. She was one of the facilitators. And honestly, I was able to think of the grief in a new way, those feelings in a new way. And what that group did for me was every week I would come and I would just kind of, bring forward whatever loss I was experiencing. If you imagine that many family members, every month is a new adventure, right? So you have death anniversaries, you have birthdays, you have, dates when someone started to get ill, things like that. So every month I was affected by my grief. So learning how to bring that person forward, I couldn't bring them all into the room. It was too much. So I learned that I had to just bring someone, and, usually it was my mom. I really missed my mom. And I missed Donna. And so one of the ones, so often what I would do is I would go to the group. It was like an hour and a half. I'm not sure what it is now. And then I would walk home, and I would often do art as a way of being able to release what came up in the group for me. And so one of the pieces that came for my mom, hopefully you can see it. That one got really big. I don't know why, but let's see if I can make it maybe smaller. No, maybe bigger. So my mom was, her mom and dad were English. And so they had come over and had a big family. So she was born, I thought, in 1932. This is what happened when most of your family members have died, is that you don't have dates for people. So I always thought my mom was born in 1932. And last year, a family member who was going through some books found my mom's birth certificate, and she was actually born in 1931. So I got the year wrong. But so this is mixed media. So I took images that felt like her. So there's like the bridge in London. There's this really glamorous woman that maybe could be her mom, like that kind of thing. And I just put all of these images together, and that really, it just really spoke to me. This piece is actually, I gave to a really good friend of mine who really, her family took me in. Her parents are like my surrogate parents. And so, being able to, have a place to land. So I gifted that painting to her as a kind of like a tribute to that relationship. And then the other one I wanted to talk about was, well, I got two more, is the happy accident. Oh, geez, this one's really big. Okay, there we go. So this one was one of those days. So, again, Donna died, Donna's birthday, July 14th. She died July 31st. And so that time of year, I often take time off. And so in, that day, I was painting outside, just exploring some, I think it was like just drizzling paint, just trying to see what was going to be able to come out of it, and kind of playing around with it. And it was really hot out. I remember that. And I was waiting for the paint to dry, basically. I had, CBC opera, Saturday at the opera on, and it was hot. So I went in to get a glass of water, and I was just noticing, when you take the glass and there's this condensation, it was like that hot, right? And I was just like, oh, it's so hot out. And I came out, and my paint had like liquefied on the canvas, and I started laughing, and it was like and crying. It was like tears of joy. It was the strangest thing. And that moment, like it was one of those moments in your life when I realized anyways, it was like, I think I'm going to be okay. Like that was, one of those moments where I just thought, like, of all the things I'd been through, I was going to be all right. And I actually felt joy for the first time in a very long time. And so that one is one of those special ones. And so how I do art making now, I mean, as you all know, anyone who's grieved a long time like I have, grief kind of comes and goes. It's not as heavy, and I think of those sharp edges as it was like in the early days of my grief. But now it's softened, and it does come up occasionally. And so I still work on that through art making. And so one of the pieces that it took me a year to finish this one. Hopefully you can see it. This one's actually hanging in my living room, and I called it Rowan Wood. And so I didn't know anything about, I just thought it was called Rowan Wood. And I worked on it for about a year, just kind of, standing back and then, doing some different texture things. And what I learned about rowan wood, or rowan, I guess the rowan tree, rowan is the little redhead in Scottish folklore. So I was the redhead in my family. It was just so strange how that came, forward. And then the other thing is that the rowan wood tree, or the rowan tree, is about wisdom and protection and courage. And I just thought that spoke to where I'm at now, that all of these years, and I still continue to work on, when the grief comes, I take it to the art, right? And I take it to the journaling. And so that's a big one. The quote that I was wanting to share too is that growth, when you're in it, you don't really know it, but sometimes you don't really realize it. But I feel like I can say, after all these years of my grieving journey, that growth is an erratic forward movement, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and remembering to be gentle with yourself. And I know that, like, people often ask, like, well, how can I'm not a professional artist. How can I use art making to help me process my grief? And I always, basically always kind of give the same answer. Now I know what I did that worked for me. I journaled. A lot of those journals, I can't even read. They're so tear soaked, they're just blobs on paper now, but it helped me to get it out of my body and on the page. Those journals, I took that to to sometimes a canvas, or sometimes I put that into poetry, but just being able to draw anything in this, like, while you're in the moment, it helps you be able to get it outside of your body, right? And not judging yourself, trusting that, generally you're going to be okay. It's just, you have to be able to allow those emotions to come in waves when they come, and be able to release them and let them go when they go. And finding quotes and stories and music that helps resonate with you. I know when Donna died, I think it was Ben Harper. Ben Harper had a double album that came out around that time, and I listened to that thing over and over again. It took me years to re-listen to it, and I just recently re-listened to it while I was putting this together. And it really is amazing to hear it, because it does transport you back to that time. And I now know that time doesn't feel as heavy, and it doesn't feel as sharp. It's definitely softened. And I still miss her every day, but I know that I'm doing my best. And that's really what I think is important, is to make sure that you're doing your best. So I'm gonna end with bringing Donna up again. I love that picture. I only have 2 pictures of her. She hated getting her picture taken. So this one, and another one when I think I was about 10. And most of the pictures she took of me. So I have tons of pictures of me, but none of her. So I'm going to close on that. And so thank you very much for listening. Now, does anyone have questions? I think I can stop sharing now.